Why is innovation changing fundamentally, and where's it going? Well, there are a number of big drivers. The first is a technology driver. We have a new global medium of human communications. Call it the Web 2.0. And this ain't your daddy's internet. The old web, you accessed it through a PC, tethered to a desktop. The new web, you access it through billions, soon trillions of inert objects that become smart communicating devices. My hotel room across the street, the door has a chip in it and it's internetwork. The door has knowledge. I had a camera stolen from a hotel room in Miami and the door knew about me. It knew who'd been in and out of the room. That's a relatively new reno on that hotel. The door probably has an IP address. That means the door is an internet appliance. I have a friend in Toronto, everything in his house that has electrical power has an IP address. And all this stuff talks to itself. I had no idea what his toaster says to his refrigerator, but he was bragging that his fence talks to his sprinkler. And I said, well, Ken, why would you care? He says, Don, if a burglar comes over the fence, the sprinkler is my first line of defense. So this is pervasive ambient computing. And it won't be long before your toasters got a little prize for the power source that can give it the cheapest source of power to toast your crumpet. Broadband mobility. Remember dial-up? The new web is geospatial. The location is known, and that changes many things. It's true multimedia, and the new web is based on XML. The old web was based on HTML, and that was a platform for the presentation of content, which is why during the dot-com period, everybody talked about eyeball stickiness, page view, content is king. Remember that? The new web's based on XML. That's not a platform for presentation, it's a platform for computation. The internet is becoming a giant global programmable computer. And every time you go on it and you say tag something, you're programming this big computer. And when we all share a computer, that means that we have a platform for collaboration. Furthermore, the new web is integrated with traditional IT. These things used to be separate. So this is not your daddy's internet. Now there's a second big force, and it's a demographic force. There's a new generation of young people that have grown up digital, and these kids are different. I started studying children as a generation about 15 years ago when I noticed how my own children were effortlessly able to use all this sophisticated technology. And at first I thought my children are prodigies. But then I noticed that all their friends were like them, so that was a bad theory. So I started working with 300 kids, and it was a dozen years ago I wrote a book called Growing Up Digital. You have the new book that they handed out to you today, Grown Up Digital. The eldest of these kids turned 31 this year. They're coming into the workforce, the marketplace, into society, and there's no more powerful force for change of every institution. Exhibit A, they just elected their first president of the United States. And that's not just my point of view, it's his point of view as well. If you're born between 1946 and 1965, you're part of the baby boom, biggest generation ever. Then the birth rate dropped for 12 years as the boomers delayed having kids, and they were the first generation to do that. And around 1978, the boomers started having kids. These are the three post-war generations, the baby boom, the bust, sometimes called Gen X, and the echo of the boom. And we can see this in all kinds of data. This is school enrollment in the United States, boom, bust, echo. But we don't understand this yet. We talk about the aging of the population. I'm not sure that's a good term. The population's not just aging, it's bifurcating. If we understood this, we'd know why the schools are in crisis in the United States, for example. It's a huge wave of youngsters in the high schools and the universities. But we don't get this. We say, yeah, the schools are in crisis. I know. What should we do? I don't know. Why don't we cut back on funding for education? You know, maybe that'll help. We don't get this yet. We call this generation the boomlet. It's not a boomlet. The echo is louder than the original boom. There are 80 million of them in the US alone, and around the world this is a demographic tsunami. On the basis of their demographic muscle alone, they'll dominate the 21st century. Now, what's this got to do with innovation? Biggest generation ever. What's the defining characteristic of this generation? of the kids. Yeah. I mean, this is the first generation to be bathed in bits. Computers, the internet, interactive technologies are part of the experience of youth. And time online is not taken away from hanging out with your friends, learning the piano, talking to your parents, or doing your homework. Time online is taken away from television, correct. The baby boomers watched 24 hours a week of TV per kid when they were growing up. These kids watch a lot less TV and they watch it differently. And when they come home, they don't turn on their computer, they turn on, or their television, they turn on their computer. And they're in 3 different windows talking to their friends and doing their homework and, you know, with a video game going and 3 magazines. The TV may be going on in the background. It's sort of like ambient media. It's like music. This is affecting brain development. And you know something? My research shows that overall, with balance, kids need balance, overall, it's for the good. You see, because during extended adolescence, 8 to 18, this critical period of brain development, how you spend your time affects what your brain is like. And if you spend your time 24 hours a week watching TV like my generation did, that gives you a certain kind of brain. If you spend an equivalent amount of time being the active handler and collaborator and searcher and scrutinizer of information, that gives you a different kind of brain. This is a generation of enormously creative young people. Furthermore, this is the first time in human history when children are an authority about something really important. Think about that one. I was an authority on model trains when I was 11. Today, the 11-year-old at the breakfast table is an authority on this digital revolution that's changing business, commerce, government, learning, publishing, entertainment, innovation, every institution in society. In the 60s, we had a generation gap, big differences between kids and parents. That doesn't exist today. Kids and parents get along great. Look at your iPod and your kid's iPod. There's overlap. My parents didn't even like the Beatles, let alone the Doors. What we have today is what I call a generation lap, where kids are lapping their parents on the info track. And if you've got a teenager in your house, you know what I'm talking about. Who does the systems administration in your home? So this is creating a unique period. And our time is a little tight today, so I'm not going to tell you the story. This is basically, I interviewed 4 youngsters in front of a panel of an audience of several thousand people. It's a big audience. And out of the mouths of babes, I'll just tell you one. On the left there is Rahaf Harfouch. Born in Syria, studying in Paris, her boyfriend's in Toronto. They turn on video Skype all day long to keep their relationship going. They cook across the Atlantic Ocean and stuff. I asked her, does your generation use email? She said, not really. Email is sort of like yesterday's technology. And I said, well, if you did use email, what would you use it for? She says, email. That's kind of like a formal technology, say for sending a thank you letter to one of your friend's parents. That would be a good use of email. I said to her, aren't you part of the dumbest generation? That's the title of a book. You're not informed, you're ignorant, you don't read the newspaper, you don't watch a TV show. Don't you get TV news? Don't you get your news from Jon Stewart and The Daily Show on Comedy Central? Aren't we lost because of you and your generation? She says, well, I don't think that's a fair stereotype. I think everybody I know is very well informed. She says, I don't read the newspaper, but she's putting it back to me. But Mr. Tapscott, have you ever seen one of those things? They come out once a day. And they don't have hot links, and they're not multimedia, and you get this weird black stuff on your fingers. She says, I'm informed because I have about 60 or 70 RSS feeds. I like to triangulate the news. She says, I don't watch the evening news on television, but does anybody? Sam Donaldson says to me the average age is 61. She says, it's true I watch The Daily Show, Jon Stewart, but not to get the news. She says The Daily Show isn't funny unless you know the news. So this is a generation that's smart, they're collaborative, and my research, we interviewed 11,000 of them. They want freedom, freedom of choice and mobility. They want to customize everything. The old one-size-fits-all product, service, whatever, is inappropriate. A generation of scrutinizers. There's so much BS on the internet, they need to be a generation of authenticators. They have very strong values. Civic activity is at an all-time high in the United States and Canada, for example. A generation of natural collaborators. They want to have fun in everything that they're doing. They want things to happen fast, and it's a generation characterized by innovation. Biggest generation ever, with these kinds of characteristics coming into our institutions all around the world, a huge force for change. Now you put those two together and you get a social revolution. I could show you 50 charts, and I won't, but they all look like this. They show the old HTML website being eclipsed by the XML-based community. Could we go back? Is that possible? I don't know. You want to create a context whereby people can self-organize. So Flickr does that, and they beat Kodak EasyShare, and YouTube beats MTV. MTV provides content. Facebook beats Match.com. Wikipedia beats, oh, this is hardly fair. At the back of the room, you may not see there's a little red line along the bottom there. A lot of these blogs are garbage. There's a new one created every second of the day, 24 hours a day, and some of them are bigger than the mainstream media. What's going on here? 2 words: self-organization. It was a 2.5 years ago story. Christmas. I gave my son Alex, who was a junior in college, 20 years old at the time, I gave him an advance copy of my book, Wikinomics, for Christmas. I gave him some other things as well, okay? But he says, "Thanks, Dad." He goes off, he starts reading the book. Comes back a couple hours later, he says, "Hey, Dad, this is a good book." It's like he's surprised or something. He says, "I think I'll create a community on Facebook." I said, "You mind if I watch?" 15 minutes later, he's got the Wikinomics community. Another 15 minutes later, he's got 6 members. By the time reading Turkey on Christmas night, he's got 130 members in 7 countries, 7 regional coordinators, a president, secretary, and chief information officer. He's put out a PDF of the first 2 chapters of the book. I got a couple of kids writing in saying, "Mr. Tapscott, we found errors in your book." And the community, before I'm eating turkey, is placing demands on me. How exactly will Mr. Tapscott be contributing to our community? What is this? Self-organization has been around throughout human history. There was no central committee of the English language that said this will be called a key. It just kind of happened. But what used to take place over millennia or centuries can now happen in months or weeks or on a single Christmas day. And that sets us up for why we're here today. Oh, by the way, Obama figured this out. MyBarackObama.com. Someone sent me an email a couple of years ago saying, "Do you know the senator from Illinois thinks that your book, Wikinomics, is the key to getting elected and changing America?" And I went there, and right below the homepage was my book and this whole community. And my initial reaction was, I'm the man. And then I noticed there's also a Young Firefighters for Obama community and a Single Moms Who Support Daycare for Obama community and a Xbox Users Group for Obama. He created a platform whereby people self-organized. 35,000 communities created the energy to bring him to power. And now, of course, he's using it not just to get elected, he's using it to change the way you govern. So this is leading to a big economic change and a fundamentally new paradigm in how we innovate. Why? Well, throughout the 20th century, we created wealth through the old vertically integrated corporation. It did everything from soup to nuts. And 70 years ago, a Nobel Prize-winning economist named Ronald Coase asked a deceptively simple question. He said, "Why does the firm exist?" If Adam Smith is right, the open market's the best mechanism for determining how goods and resources and information are allocated. Why isn't everybody an independent contractor at every step along the way in production? And he said the answer is, and he won a Nobel Prize for saying this, the answer is transaction costs. And the way that he defined that, he meant the cost of collaboration. He said the cost of search, this is 70 years ago, the cost of search, of finding all the right information out there in an open market, be totally prohibitive. The cost of coordination, of contracting. And the big industrialists understood this. Henry Ford had within his boundaries a power plant, a glass factory, steel mill, shipping company, because he knew that the costs of collaboration in an open market were greater than the costs of doing things inside the boundaries of a corporation. Along came IT, and a bunch of other things that dropped these collaboration costs. Organizations became extended. Then we saw the internet, and collaboration costs dropped further, where vertically integrated companies unbundled into focus companies that work within networks, or as I called them, business webs. Cisco understood this, created a network business model. It succeeded. Its competitors fell behind. And now the costs of collaboration are dropping so much that peers can come together and not just talk about stuff, create things. We're in the early days of the creation of a new mode of production. So if you can create an encyclopedia with 1 million people who never met, the quality is just as good as Britannica, according to the big study that's been done, what else could you create? Could you create an operating system? Linux is the dominant operating system for medium and large computers in the world, and it has a lot of customers. Some of them are big, like China. Could you create a bank? Zopa.com, a lot of interest. People can't get money from banks for loans. Peer-to-peer lending. Could you create a motorcycle? The Chinese motorcycle industry is a whole bunch of little companies that cooperate together. They meet in tea houses, and on the internet, there's no OEM pulling all the strings. This is now 1/3 of all motorcycle production in the world. So, talent used to be inside our boundaries. It can now be outside. So we can peer, but we need to also be open. Keith said sunlight is the best disinfectant. You're going to be naked anyway as a company. And this is causing some good things to happen, transparency. If you're going to be naked, well, fitness is no longer optional, you know. Or if you're going to be naked, you better be buff. Values evidence like never before. Sharing intellectual property. Well, why would you do that? Isn't that communist? Some people say Linux is communist. IBM shared $400 million of software. They placed it in the commons in Linux. Why would they do that? They've gone communist. Created a platform upon which they built a multi-billion-dollar business. They saved themselves $900 million a year developing their own proprietary operating system, and they got to stick it to Microsoft. Probably not in that order of importance. And finally, think global, act local? No. You need to act, of course, you need to be sensitive to local peculiarities. You need to behave as a global corporation. So I'll just tell you a story and then give you a couple of examples, and we're going to get a great panel up here. One of our panelists is this fine-looking gentleman. His name is Rob McEwen. The reason I know Rob is because he's my neighbor. And this is how I know this story. He held a cocktail party at his house to meet the neighbors. And he said, "You're Tapscott, you're the writer strategy guy." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "What do you do?" He says, "Well, I used to be a banker and now I'm a gold miner." And he tells me this amazing story. He took over this gold mining company and his geologist couldn't find where the gold was. So he kept giving them more money to get more geological data. They couldn't tell him where to go into production. After a few years, he was so frustrated, he was ready to shut the thing down. But he had an epiphany, and I want to ask him about this. That he said, if my geologists don't know where the gold is, maybe somebody else does. So he adopted these 4 principles I just described to you. One of them is he took his geological data, the biggest secret in the mining industry, it's kept in safes and high security computer companies. He published it on the internet and he held a contest called the Gold Corp Challenge, which was essentially $500,000 in prize money for anybody who can tell me, do I have any gold? And if so, where is it? He gets submissions from all around the world. They use techniques he's never heard of, 77 submissions. And for his $500,000 in prize money, he found a little over $3 billion worth of gold. And his market value over a period of time went from $90 million to $10 billion. And I can tell you, because he's my neighbor, he's a happy camper. What did he do? He peered. See, he should have fired his geologists, I guess, because talent's inside, right? He wondered who are their peers. Some of the best submissions didn't come from geologists. He was open. He stood up in front of the world and he said, I'm the CEO of this gold mining company and I don't know where our gold is. He didn't think global and act local. He viewed the world as his geology department and he shared his precious intellectual property and increase the value of his company by 2 orders of magnitude. So here's some of the things we're going to be talking about over the next 2 days. Ideagoras, open markets for uniquely qualified minds. So P&G's looking for a molecule that'll take red wine off a shirt. They got 9,000 chemists inside their boundaries, and there's now 1 million outside that they can get to. They're organized into ideagoras. And sure enough, there's a retired chemist in New York or a grad student in Taipei that comes up with a molecule. They pay them a few $100,000. We'll hear from Filippo Passerini. Half of all of their innovation now comes from outside the company. But what about the not invented here syndrome? Well, we'll hear about that. Idea connection. This is another one. It says, buy and sell inventions, innovations, patents, and ideas. Seek solutions, solve problems. This is about, the world is full of people with problems and people with solutions. We now have a platform that drops collaboration costs that can put them back together again. What if we applied this mass collaboration to venture capital? Call it Venture Capital 2.0. Well, this is a company called Vencor that's doing that. Full disclosure, I have an investment in a parent company of Vencor. But the crowd helps finds the deals. And then the crowd selects the right company. The crowd helps due diligence. The crowd chooses the management. The crowd helps manage the company. And the crowd is involved in a liquidity event. And if, depending on the role that you play in the crowd, you get to contribute. We'll hear more about that today as well. Pass the ball. Cisco is one of our panelists today. We've got Martin De Beer, who's on the panel. And this is WebEx, one of their subsidiaries, that's holding a series of contests to attempt to seek the world's insights in how to solve all kinds of social problems. The Huffington Post, this extraordinary thing that the New York Times should have created, but leaders of old paradigms have difficulty embracing the new. So while we're on a New York Times death watch, wondering how much longer they can service their debt, the Huffington Post is this spectacularly powerful, I was going to say publication, but it's not. It's a platform and it's a community. And the Huffington Post is involved in all kinds of incentivized collaborations, and we'll learn about those. NetSquared, a week ago in San Francisco, people came from all around North America. NetSquared has these meeting mashups. Look at that. 35 different groups all around the world of people that come together physically, but they're all involved in all kinds of new incentivized collaborations. This is one called the Human Rights Center Mobile Challenge, top 10 projects that are underway, and again, prizes for these. My own book, Grown Up Digital, I created a traditional website, and a few people, came to the website and blah, blah, blah. And then I decided, no, I need to take it to the next level. I created a community. I put a challenge. How would you change the educational system for relevance and effectiveness for the 21st century? A huge prize of $1,000. I got people from 60 countries submitted 200 videos. And we had a virtual awards ceremony for the top 10 runners-up, and it was a tie for the 2 winners. They self-organized and created 32 communities on their own to solve all kinds of different problems having to do with education. Rather than thinking website, I just created a context and an incentive system whereby good things can happen. You can even get your customers to create your advertisements for you as a contest. You know about this, the Doritos Super Bowl? Let's just play the first ad. This actually ran on the Super Bowl, created by a couple of nobodies. Young.
Paper or plastic?
Paper's fine.
I like these. Oh, nacho cheese. Old school. Fiery habanero? Yeah, those are hot. Oh, salsa verde. Oh, blazing buffalo and ranch? Giddy up! Gonna need a cleanup on register 6.
So that ran on the Super Bowl. It the people from Pepsi here can tell us the details, but the main prize there was that these nobodies became the hottest ad creation people in town. Now, some of the more racy ones didn't get on to the Super Bowl. And some of my favorites were in the more racy category. It doesn't mean I'm what was that last one? A Z, whatever. But one of them, under popular pressure, did get on the Super Bowl. Could we play that now, please? I mean, you want something creative? What ad agency is going to dress somebody up in a mouse suit and have them beat up your customer? But I guess if you're selling Doritos, the Dorito demographic, that's a good thing. So let me close then. We have a new communication platform. We have a new generation for who innovation is like the air. We have a social revolution where now people can self-organize in unprecedented ways. All they need is a context and an incentive to do that. And we have an economic revolution, a change to the deep structure and architecture of the corporation, of how we get capability, orchestrate capability to innovate, to create goods and services. And given this is creating a perfect storm. And you tie this in with the current economic crisis, and it's true, hunkering down, while necessary, is not going to be sufficient. Because I'm convinced, and I'll leave you with this thought, it's a provocative thought, and it's the theme of my new book, that this is not a recession that we're in only, and it's not an economic crisis. It's a punctuation point in history that we'll look back on this, and we'll understand that this was the convulsive shock to the system that created a whole bunch of burning platforms in many of our institutions to bring about profound change. And that, in fact, we'll conclude that was the turning point when we decided the industrial economy ran out of gas. Financial system needs more than fresh regulation and a new infusion of capital. It needs a whole new modus operandi based on these principles. The energy platform, it's not that we're going to run out of carbon, we're going to destroy the planet before we do that. Our systems for global cooperation are based on the nation state. We need to innovate. The World Economic Forum has a program underway called the Global Redesign Initiative to reinvent, or at least to provide some suggestions for the reinvention of our global institutions. The education system, the universities right now, I have a piece in The Edge where I have a bunch of professors and heads of universities attacking me, but I said the universities are actually in deep trouble. And data point, the smartest kids don't go to lectures. The big thing is to get an A without having ever gone to the lectures. So when you have the cream of the crop of an entire generation boycotting the model of pedagogy, that's a problem. Our old models of government, command and control, vertically integrated government bureaucracies grew up at the same time as this vertically integrated corporation. And for these young kids, the you vote, I rule model of democracy is inappropriate. The industrial age corporation, the media, is collapsing. Many of our media are collapsing right now because they have an old model. Arguably, science is deeply flawed. Healthcare, we're not going to fix this by tinkering. We need to move beyond an industrial model of healthcare. The cities, it's not just that Detroit, half of the population's left and they're wild animals running around. Cities around the world are starting to run into a severe crisis. This is a time of very profound change. And my last thought to you is that this is a new paradigm in innovation that we're talking about in the next 2 days. And when you get one of these things, you get a crisis of leadership. They cause dislocation, conflict, confusion. New paradigms are nearly always received with coolness. And vested interests fight against change. If I could just have my panel, if you could come up to the stage here, that would be great. You know who you are. And there's someone who will show you where to sit. And while you're getting on the stage, I'll make a final thought. Leadership can come from anywhere. The person at the top can't learn for the organization as a whole anymore. Things are getting too complicated, which is why leadership is each of our personal opportunity if we will it. There was a French pilot from the Second World War. His name was Saint-Exupéry. And he said we should welcome the future, for soon it will be the past. But we should respect the past, for it was once all that was humanly possible. I don't mean to be critical of the way that we've done things, but it's now possible to go forward. And another Frenchman, Victor Hugo, said, "There's nothing so powerful as an idea whose time has come." You know something? The time has come for a new model of innovation, one based on collaboration and on these principles of openness, of sharing of intellectual property, of peering, of acting global, and where collectively we need to design the incentive systems to make this new paradigm work. So, thank you very much.